Hi everyone, and welcome to this video blog, this vlog as we were going to call it, on backpacking in Southeast Asia. So my name's Ewan,
And I'm Neil.
and as I say, we're going to talk about some of our own adventures in Southeast Asia and some of the travel health and health related issues we had while we were there, and some of the other things that you might come across while you're there. So Neil, you've been on a bit of a mission in Southeast Asia, haven't you?
Yeah, I've travelled sort of the main backpacker routes really in Southeast Asia, sort of the typical ones that we get coming through the clinics, the Thailand, Laos, Cambodia sort of route, and include Malaysia and the Vietnam routes as well. Yeah.
And I've travelled down through Thailand into Malaysia as well. So we've both had a bit of experience in that part of the world. So let's start off with malaria. Talk me through. Did you take your anti-malarial tablets when you were there, Neil?
Do you know what? When I went, I actually had just come from travelling in Africa at the time, and so I was already on my antimalarials for travelling in Africa, and so I carried on pretty much the whole time when I was in Southeast Asia when I was there. So I did.
Good.
The use that I went into, I was on doxycycline at the time. That's not to advocate doxycycline over any particular other medication, but it worked for me.
Other brands are available.
And it was suitable for me. It worked for me, and I would say that there is that body of evidence now that talks about the extra gut protection that doxycycline can give you, and I'd say that I very rarely ever got sick on my travels, so I think there's the added bonus of that. But coming back to the malaria point, you know, one of the hardest things I think with malaria in Southeast Asia is pinpointing which areas people are going to go into.
That's right, yeah. And also I think being compliant with it as well. I didn't take anti-malarials, but I was certainly for most of the time in areas where it is low risk for malaria in Thailand and Malaysia, although I can't say at the time, it was many years ago, whether or not I would have been compliant or whether I was paying attention.
Yeah, whether you did that intentionally or whether it was just out of pure luck. And I think it's actually majority of the main backpacker routes, particularly through Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam.
Yeah,
a lot of backpackers won't ever go into a high risk area.
Yeah.
People obviously do get freaked out by Cambodia. There's quite a high risk across a lot of Cambodia, but actually the key areas that a lot of people do go to when they are in Cambodia is actually low risk areas. They tend to go to Angkor Wat, which is the big temples around Siem Reap, which is a low risk area, and then onto the capital, Phnom Penh, which again is a low risk area. So very rarely do people then explore out of those areas.
And yet, as travel health professionals, we don't necessarily know where they're going to go. They don't know where they're going to go.
Definitely.
So often we end up giving them cover for malaria for maybe a certain amount of weeks or days while they're there, just to make sure that if they do go off the track that they were planning.
And you probably know yourself, you've travelled around a lot of places in the world. How often do you know your itinerary in advance?
Exactly.
Even if you planned
Never.
it, have you ever really kept to that itinerary?
Never. You always end up meeting different people, going different directions.
Definitely.
Reading the guidebook once you get there, and in fact deciding to go somewhere completely different.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the biggest factors. When I see in our clinics people that go into Southeast Asia, that is one of the biggest factors that I factor into whether we should be looking at the whole time they're over there, whether they should be on.
Absolutely. And what I often tend to do is kind of try and, you know, if we can't come to a decision, try and suggest that they will take a number of malaria tablets for a certain length of time and try and get them to focus their trip in the high risk parts. Often you look at the Cambodia on the map, a lot of it's high risk, you know, although as Neil points out, they might not be going there, but try and get them to focus their time in Cambodia and Laos for a certain number of weeks and give them cover for that length of time. And then the rest of the time, probably while they're in Thailand, maybe while they're going down the coast of Vietnam, they're going to be much lower risk.
Definitely. What would you say about buying out there? I mean, there's a lot of pharmacies out there, and it's particularly in Bangkok.
There's a Boots.
There is Boots
on the Koh San Road.
There is a Boots on the Koh San Road. Yeah. I think it's a genuine Boots.
Yeah, I think it is.
I don't think it's a rip-off
one. Generally speaking, I would say that you can never guarantee the quality of medications when you're in the developing world. less developed world. So I would probably say that I generally wouldn't advise it, whether or not people, if they're stuck in a situation and don't have any other options, would certainly, probably want to give it a try as their best alternative, possibly. But I wouldn't advise doing that. If people do, there are ISTM.
What's ISTM?
The International Society of Travel Medicine.
Okay.
Thanks, Neil. And they do have a clinic, a global clinic directory, and you can go to a clinic which is on one of those directories, and you may stand a better chance of getting legitimate drugs there. But again, we can't guarantee.
Well, I guess because there's always going to be the risk, isn't there, with any of the travellers that we see, that they do lose the medication, and particularly, for example, the trip that I was on, I actually took the medication from the UK, but for the sheer length of time that I was on that trip, there was a lot of medication. I could quite easily have lost that if it was in one of the bags that got stolen or anything like that. So that's good information to know.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of ideas about malaria in Southeast Asia, but without further ado, we'll move on to our next topic, which I think we'll talk about accidents. I think because you've had a few accidents in your time, haven't you, Neil?
Less so me personally. I've had a few accidents that have gone along the way with people that I've been travelling with. Okay.
You haven't crashed one. I've seen pictures of you on mopeds in Thailand.
Yeah, I mean I'm sure that a high percentage of the backpackers that go round Southeast Asia will at some point end up either driving one themselves or on someone else's vehicle of moped or motorbike. Mm-hmm. If not that, they'll certainly end up in a tuk-tuk, or they'll certainly end up in a higher risk vehicle of some point. We know that the rates of road accidents in Southeast Asia are much higher than they are in Western countries, and we know that the medical facilities aren't probably going to be as great. Plus, I'll put my hands up, when I went out there, I'd never ridden a motorbike in my life before, and within a day of riding on the back of somebody else's, I got the urge, and I ended up riding my own motorbike when I was over there, and then subsequently was riding around pretty much the whole of Laos on a motorbike for a good month or so. Many places that we would travel to, we were 2 to 3 days away from anywhere, let alone necessarily any good healthcare provision. We fortunate enough that when we were out there, I personally didn't have any major accidents on the motorbikes, but certainly a number of the people that we were travelling with regularly fell off their motorbikes and got burns on their legs. One of the key things with mopeds, one piece of advice, if you are going to get onto those mopeds, is knowing which side to get off because of the exhaust. See where your exhaust is and always get off on the other side, because you're going to burn your leg otherwise. Right.
Good tip there. The second time I went to Thailand, I planned with a friend to hire some large off-road motorbikes, 750cc ideas, where we turned up to hire them the day we were both very hungover. I started looking around the shop and was getting very nervous. My friend, who was quite experienced with motorbikes, I was thinking, what's he going to think if I try and back out here now? And as I said to him, Simon, I'm not so sure. And he was like, we're not getting these today. And we ended up getting some scooters instead, which were much safer, although we probably shouldn't be on them in the state we were in. But there you go.
And sadly, there are accidents all over the time, and I've got close friends that have been in accidents and been on more powerful motorbikes and had accidents over there, and the medical facilities, and I've got a close friend who was paralysed from being on a motorbike accident out there as well. And they lived out there, and so it's something to be aware of. It's difficult to say don't do it, because it's such a great way to explore the country, but it's knowing the risks, it's knowing where the healthcare facilities are if you are going to have an accident, where, and it's not just about motorbikes. We had one of the big places that a lot of the backpacker route will go through in Laos, for example, is Van Vieng.
Oh yes.
Have you heard of Van Vieng, Euan?
I have. I believe it's been bulldozed now. I'm not sure.
Well, yeah. So it's the tubing where basically on the river, it was a tributary to the Mekong. There is basically sit in a big tyre blow up tube, and you go down the river from bar to bar to bar, and as you can imagine, rivers,
Doesn't sound
water,
dangerous at all.
alcohol, zip lines, slides. Yeah,
Brilliant.
it doesn't really all mix so well together when it comes to health.
And that's something to make travellers aware of, is they are going to go, they are going to drink, and you have to make them aware of the potential risks that are happening, and the fact that they're in a place where the medical facilities are not going to be what they're used to back home. There's often going to be no ambulance coming.
No.
So,
and they have to pay for it. That's they're not going to be used to that expectation of having to pay for everything that they're going to need as well.
Indeed. So accents, we could go on a long time about those.
We could, yeah. But linked to the healthcare element, let's move on to our next topic then, rabies.
Oh, there's a big one. Where do we start with rabies?
Wow.
I think moving straight on, like you said, travelling by motorbike or scooter or bicycle, you do put yourself at a higher risk of dogs biting you as you're running along, cycling along or whatever. And also you tend to go into more remote areas when you are using a motorbike or a scooter or something like that. So that is something which can put you at high risk of the dangers of rabies, because it is more difficult to get back to get post-exposure treatment. And so that's why being remote could be a high risk for rabies.
So you're saying that in Southeast Asia you would recommend the rabies, the pre-exposure, so the course of vaccines prior to travelling to Southeast Asia?
I'm saying that definitely,
For backpacking?
definitely anyone who's going to be backpacking, going off the beaten track, possibly going remote, going for an extended period of time, should very seriously consider having the rabies vaccines, yes.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of myths out there about the rabies vaccines, and I think that often that damages its reputation, but we know it's one of the best vaccines in the world and gives probably one of the highest levels of protection against disease that a vaccine can give.
Yeah,
so
an excellent vaccine.
I think it's very much worthwhile. Also, there's areas that have got really particularly high rates in Southeast Asia. For example, Bali is a particular area that has got extremely high rates of rabies.
And had a shortage of the rabies immunoglobulin, which is an essential part of the post-exposure care if you haven't had the pre-exposure vaccines. So definitely something to really consider if you go to Asia. And I think we'll save the myth busting about the vaccine buy you time, etc., for another vlog.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so moving on, let's any other diseases that you can think of?
Well, I'm just thinking about the mosquito driven diseases that we've seen over there. I think that we all know that we get bitten by mozzies over there. We've touched on malaria already, but I think there's others that we really need to be thinking of. Ones that we can be vaccinated against and ones that we can't. My housemate actually got dengue fever when he was out travelling that was actually probably picked up either northern Thailand or northern Laos that he picks it up, and very unwell, feverish illness, put him out of action for a good couple of weeks, wasn't very well at all with it.
Still no vaccine available.
No, generally in most cases the dengue fever, which is a daytime biting mosquito, and it generally is a self-resolving illness, and we would say mild flu-like type illness, as with all most tropical diseases, but still is going to ruin your holiday, especially if you're only out there for a short period of time.
That's right. And I believe the second time that you get dengue, if you get it a second time, can be much more serious, and you can get the hemorrhagic version of the disease, which can be quite make you bleed all over the place, and can be more lethal. So
not such a nice one. So the key things really: avoid getting bitten. Yeah, that's the big thing with dengue.
Absolutely,
let's avoid getting bitten.
Insect bite avoidance. So how would you go about that then?
Well, particularly for dengue specifically, really, because it's a daytime, it's your bug spray, so your DEET bug spray. We know that the only one that's really got any research on it is DEET. It's the key one which we should really be thinking about is DEET, and it's safe. It's a horrible liquid, but it's safe. We know it works, and it's a horrible liquid to use, but we just need to make sure
it's the gold standard.
It is
the gold standard.
Yeah.
So other methods that we could use to avoid insect bites in the daytime?
In the daytime, it's covering
when you're
up
on the beach in your bikini.
Well, exactly. It's covering up, and one of the key things when we talk about the bug spray is making sure when you're using sun cream as well, put the sun cream on first, DEET on second,
Okay.
on top.
Sun cream on first, DEET on second.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what happens halfway through the day when you need to put on some more?
You just need to reapply.
Reapply both of them. Yeah.
Reapply both of them. Yeah. The lower the percentage of DEET, the more often you're going to need to reapply. So the higher the percentage, the less you're going to reapply. But if you're going in the sea, if you're washing it off, you need to make sure you're reapplying it.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. What about Japanese encephalitis? Would you recommend the vaccine for backpackers in Southeast Asia?
We know that one with Japanese encephalitis, it can be seasonal. There's different seasons when it is. We know it's a more rural area. So if people are going into rice paddy field areas, that's where you're getting more risk of the Japanese encephalitis disease. Rice paddy fields, Southeast Asia, anywhere out of a city really is going to be you're going to be at risk of picking up that disease.
And even on the edge of cities.
So I guess it's around how long you're over there for. You know, if you've got to weigh up the risk. If you're going just for a quick holiday off to Thailand for a week and you're mainly going to be down on the beaches and the islands, you're probably going to be a lower risk than someone that's going to be in Southeast Asia for 6 months, going to be travelling all over and in and out of different areas. So it's weighing up that element. We know the vaccine's very good. We know once you've had the course, it gives you I think it's around in the high 90s percentage of level of protection. So
yeah. And in a lot of the Southeast Asian countries we've been talking about, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, the season tends to be the wet season, which is May to October, May to November, that kind of time. I think it can be, when you go down into Indonesia, it can be much longer. It could be all year round, depending on, wet seasons and where they move. So that's all we're really going to have time to talk about in terms of insects. Finally, one topic that is very important to think about is sexual health.
Yeah, and I think this is an overarching one for all of our travels. But I mean, Southeast Asia, we know it's a big backpacking route. It's not just the backpackers. There are plenty of other people that may be attracted to the elements of Southeast Asia as well. And so I think it's an area that we should always look at and discuss. Yeah.
Were you good at protecting your sexual health while you were there?
Always good, Ian.
Excellent. Abstinence, that's right. Never fails.
What was your experience of Thailand? And we know there's a lot of sex trade in Thailand as well, and I think there's that notoriety with Thailand. There is a bit of a sex trade there. Was you that exposed to it? Did you see much of it?
Yeah, well, I think when you're in Bangkok, you can't fail to kind of notice it. I mean, areas like is it called Pat Pong, or become like a touristy area anyway. So there's a lot of that there's a lot of things that go on there.
I'd say as well, from my experience, is that there's a much with the risk-taking behaviours associated with drinking, drugs and things like that. It's a very open, free environment when you're backpacking, and your inhibitions are reduced, and it is more likely that you're going to engage sexually with someone probably along the route of your travels.
And there's a lot of research out there to show that the number of sexual partners people have does increase massively when people go travelling.
So it's definitely, I think, something that should be factored in. And get tested when you get back as well.
Yeah, but don't even, always use barrier protection. Or, like Neil, abstinence. Anyway.
Well, I think we just touched on quite a few little areas there.
Yeah.
I think there's much bigger discussions to be had.
That was just to whet your appetite, folks.
And I think there's loads of things I mean, Southeast Asia, you could go on and on for hours, really, I think, talking about different things that can crop up. So we don't, it's definitely not an exhaustive list.
Absolutely
that we've just covered.
Not. Just touching on a few ideas and some stories from our own experiences. And I think that kind of wraps it up for our first vlog that we've recorded. But it might not be the first one that we play. So
thank you for listening to us, and
and we'll see you in the next vlog if we ever make one. Bye.
Bye.